Welcome, everyone, to the top 10 worst Spongebob episodes, in my opinion. Now, if you disagree with them, that's your opinion, and this is my opinion. And also, a lot of this is going to be just pictures, because you know how picky Viacom is. So don't expect any sort of Spongebob clips to appear, as I don't want Viacom to screw me over. But yeah, with that, let's get on to the list. To love a patty. This one is kind of creepy. The fact Spongebob falls in love with a Krabby Patty is quite unsettling. And many of the other characters find it ridiculous that SpongeBob is falling in love with this sandwich. And basically he ignores all of them. Then there's the song. And it's pretty annoying to hear. Which might have been intentional. But God, SpongeBob's voice is annoying. Not to mention, during the song, a bunch of clams try to eat the patty, to which SpongeBob attacks and shatters them, even flat out ripping one in half. Now imagine one of those clams were Junior. You know, the clam he raised alongside Patrick. Then the ending is just gross. SpongeBob takes the patty on a date at the Krusty Krab, and at this point, the patty is very moldy and disgusting. Krabs ends up convincing SpongeBob to get rid of the burger, to which SpongeBob eats it. I just don't like this episode. Next. Little Yellow Book. Oh wow, Squidward torture, where there's actually a reason for it. Oh wow, it still fails. This episode has Squidward reading SpongeBob's diary. And eventually, other civilians read with him until SpongeBob sees that they've been reading his diary and he starts crying. And then, the civilians start treating Squidward like crap. Now, while yes, Squidward was kind of a jerk by reading the diary, but then again, the civilians also read him, as I just said, so that's pretty hypocritical. And how do they not know what's SpongeBob's diary, by the way? I mean, Squidward reads parts of the diary, and then those things SpongeBob ends up doing, and everyone is seeing him do them, and they think what Squidward does is so bad that he loses his house and is arrested. What? Oh, and then the ending. SpongeBob, ends up forgiving Squidward, and that it's only his work diary, and he also has a personal one, and he also sold the work diary, and it became a bestseller. And you know what Squidward does? He starts reading that personal diary as well. Fantastic. Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom. Great. More Squidward torture. Only unlike the last one, this time it's for no reason. So, Squidward has a ticket to a Kelpie G concert, but then Patrick ends up eating it. Then on the radio, there's a contest where if you call a number, that you'd win tickets to the concert. and getting to go backstage and meet Kelpie G. And, knowing Squidward likes Kelpie G, he keeps desperately trying and fails multiple times. And yet SpongeBob gets the tickets first try, meaning now Squidward has to go to the concert with SpongeBob. But you know, SpongeBob isn't too bad here. He has some problems here and there, but he's not too bad. The real problem is Patrick. During the concert, Patrick just randomly appears and eats Squidward and SpongeBob's backstage passes. Which, how did he get here? I have no idea. And then he goes on stage, interrupting the concert, asking for food like he's at a fast food restaurant. And then stage dives. And for some reason, the squids are cheering him on. Why? I don't know. Cause they just interrupted the concert. So now SpongeBob and Squidward chase him down, but then are asked to go back to their seats. But then some jackass takes them! I'm pretty sure you are assigned a certain seat and are not allowed to pick whatever seat you want. Then Squidward and SpongeBob get kicked out of the concert, then they try going backstage to play instruments, Kelpie G disliking Squidward's clarinet, but liking SpongeBob's ukulele. And because of that, SpongeBob gets to perform on stage, while Squidward gets nothing. One course meal. Oh boy. The most hated episode of the entire series. Now, I am not considering it the absolute worst episode. It's still pretty terrible. So, Plankton is afraid of whales, which would mean he's scared of Pearl, Krabs' daughter. And because of this, Mr. Krabs takes advantage of this and starts dressing up as Pearl in a Pearl costume and starts scaring poor Plankton. And Plankton never really did anything to deserve this. Yeah, he tried stealing the formula, but that's what he is known for. This is Plankton we're talking about. You kinda would know that he'd do that kind of thing. Then there's the part, you know, the one that everyone hates. The suicide reference, where Plankton lies on the ground and asks for a bus to hit him. Now, like with what Pie Guy Rules has said about this, I don't think the writers meant for it to end up the way it did. But no matter what you say on it, it's not a great scene. It really isn't. SpongeBob sees this and says Krabs is going too far with this, and Krabs doesn't care. He really doesn't. And SpongeBob and Plankton get revenge by torturing him with his fear, which is mimes. But as it turns out, SpongeBob put up a projector that shows whales, and it scared Plankton. And to think SpongeBob was concerned about Plankton. But Before we move on to the next spot, I will say this. If you or someone you know has had suicidal thoughts, please call any of the numbers that'll be listed in the description. Suicide is not right. I've had friends who have been suicidal before. I myself have not been, but I do know of people like this. And you remember Etika? Remember what happened to him? Pretty rough time. Please, just, if you are willing to, please call the numbers. Pet Sitter Hat. Oh, this episode shows Patrick at his absolute worst. So it's SpongeBob's grandma's birthday. There's a tongue twister there. And anyways, SpongeBob goes to her house to celebrate. But someone has to take care of Gary. And who would that be? Patrick! Which obviously is a bad idea. You all know why. Patrick makes Gary starve to death by being in the bathroom for like 8 hours and eating the snail food. Forces to give him a bath using a fucking flamethrower. What? Oh, and also put salt in the bath. You know, poison to snails. And he also floods the house as well, leaving the sink on and the bathtub. Oh, and who boy, when SpongeBob gets home at the end with water literally flooding out of his house, what do we see? Gary literally flooding out of his house. What do we see? Gary reading a bedtime story to Patrick. So you're telling me Patrick tortures Gary throughout the entire episode, and then both of them acted like nothing ever happened? Yeah, that ending makes so much sense. SpongeBob doesn't question anything else that happened in his house, and it just ends. What a bad episode. And it's only number 6! The Splinter. Easily the most disgusting episode of the whole series. SpongeBob gets a splinter during work, and throughout it he tries pulling it out, which is very cringe. Squidward notices this splinter and scares him about Mr. Krabs finding out and sending him home, which, as we all know, SpongeBob likes his job. He wouldn't want to be sent home. This is like 2 minutes of filler. And then Patrick comes in and makes the situation so much worse. And so much grosser too. He takes a piece of wood on the splinter and hits it with a hammer, making SpongeBob's thumb get bigger, really red, and has some veins. And then he puts trash on it, which turns the thumb purple. And then in the ending, SpongeBob ends up showing Krabs the splinter, and Krabs, easily pulls it out, which in a way is satisfying. Not the liquid that sprays out, just the splinter getting pulled out. And then Squidward tries hurting himself so he can go home with no success. SpongeBob, you're fired. Easily the worst special of all time. Yes, worse than Atlantis SquarePantis and Truth or Square. The reason SpongeBob gets fired is because Mr. Krabs can save a nickel, which is completely stupid. You'd think that he'd get more money by having SpongeBob work there. Whatever. The rest of the first half is just nothing happening at all. And then the second half, SpongeBob tries getting a different job, which should have been where he started. These would be a hot dog restaurant, a pizza place, a taco place, and a Chinese food restaurant. And each of them, he is only able to make Krabby Patties. We've seen this in other episodes like The Big Switch. And then there's a part where SpongeBob makes snail food, which is flat out pointless, and contradicts what happened earlier. It shows that he can make other food. And it's a nice moment, but it just leads to nothing. And then SpongeBob gets kidnapped by the hot dog guy because the customers like the Krabby Patty hot dog, even though earlier he got fired from it. And the pizza guy saves him but also tries taking SpongeBob. Then a fight happens between the four restaurants, and then a Krabby Patty mascot saves SpongeBob, which just so happened to be Squidward. And then, surprise, surprise, the Krusty Krab was in disaster without SpongeBob there. Which is so cliche at this point and so annoying of an ending. Boating buddies. Oh my god. SpongeBob is so obsessed with Squidward in this one. Squidward has to go to boating school after trying to run away from SpongeBob, and drives his boat and hits a stop sign. And because it's boating school, that means putting up with SpongeBob. There's a part where SpongeBob breathes heavily and has a really creepy stare at him. And also in the episode, Squidward gets beaten up throughout the experience by some random bully character. And then he has to drive alongside SpongeBob, which you know how SpongeBob is when it comes to that. And yet, that is something that the series has never done, having it where two students drive in the same car. That's never happened. Never once. Throughout this sequence, there's parts where they get shrunken down, which is stupid. Then there's an exam. Squidward gets beaten up again and is unable to finish the exam. SpongeBob also doesn't finish, meaning Squidward has to deal with more boating school. Wonderful! A pal for Gary. Oh no. No, not this one. No! 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 Okay. I can do this. I can do this. Okay then. Well. So, SpongeBob is sad with Gary being home alone. So he gets a new pet to keep Gary company. Which, by the way, didn't end up paying for. Anyways, Gary was capable of being home alone as well. So it was pretty much unnecessary. Puffy Fluffy, who was the new pet, ends up being mean to Gary, and SpongeBob never notices throughout it. And then it becomes a big monster and tries to kill Gary. And then this next part. Oh boy, this next part. It's the next morning, and SpongeBob finds Puffy Fluffy about to eat Gary. And he says, "You put Fluffy down right now." Gary is literally about to be fucking eaten, and SpongeBob still gets mad at Gary. Puffy Fluffy tries eating SpongeBob, and then Gary saves him, and the monster runs off. And SpongeBob is still mad at him. For fuck's sake. Gary saved you from a monster that would have killed both him and you. And you're still mad at him? Oh my god. SpongeBob is so annoying here. And yet, even his worst appearance. Let's get into that, shall we? Now, the previous 9 entries on this list were definitely downright garbage. Awful episodes. But this one right here, is on a higher level of bad. So much higher than any of the others. I hate this episode so much. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for this? You better be, because I'm about to get into it right now. Okay. So, the worst SpongeBob episode, in my opinion, is Choir Boys. Words cannot describe how much I hate this episode. I really don't want to talk about it, but what choice do I have? This is a top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes list. Okay. Well, Squidward is going to a choir practice, to which SpongeBob wants to sing him a song. But Squidward doesn't want to hear it. And because of this, SpongeBob follows him along the way to the choir practice. And SpongeBob is truly infuriating. And Squidward does nothing wrong throughout this whole thing. Yet, he constantly gets tortured. And the worst part of this behemoth of shit is this scene. SpongeBob digs a hole which launches Squidward into jellyfish fields and gets stung by jellyfish. And guess what SpongeBob says about this? What a lucky break. Now I have a captive audience. This line angers me, and a lot of the community of SpongeBob as well. It basically implies that SpongeBob does not care about his friends, and that he only pretends to care. And the ending, SpongeBob gets to be in the choir, while Squidward flips the pages for him. And you know, back when I was a kid, I used to like every SpongeBob of the show, including the 9 others listed earlier. But this one, even as a kid, I hated this
episode. Just fuck this episode! And I'm so glad we've never gotten as low as this. Thank you guys for watching. This is Squishy Mushroom signing out. I'm gonna nail my balls to the wall.